I slowed this down so you could see how I load up my brush. So if you noticed, and this thing does not go backward. If you notice that I brush, I'm wiping my brush through the paint on one side. I flip the brush over, and then you can, so I can get paint, thick paint on both sides. And then if you watch this, I'm going to push my brush into the paint so I can get a thick layer of paint right on the very edge of the brush, right there. I push the brush into the paint forward like a bulldozer, and I get a nice thick layer of paint right on the outside edge of that brush. So this is a pretty tame brushstroke right there, but you'll see some much more vigorous ones later on as well. All right, so if you now watch this, this is where, in order to do that part, I just use a few little bristles on the very edge of the brush, and I drag it through the thick paint that's already there. Just grabbing the corner of that stroke that I just put down, and I'm pulling it down over the top of the other paint. As long as I do that with a light enough stroke and with enough, so in the first place, when I put when I'm putting a stroke of paint on top of another wet layer of paint, I have to have plenty of paint on my brush. That's why I load up both sides and then push the brush into the paint. So I make sure that on the edge of that, I have a lot of paint on there. That doesn't, now, when I say a lot, that's kind of relative. And so it might not be a lot to some people, but I have enough that when I lay the stroke down, it's not going to, it has enough that it can lay that on top. If I kept going until all that thick paint was gone and I kept on pushing the brush, then all I would be doing is pushing the layer that's already there. As long as I have enough paint on my brush, then when I brush that across, and I'm usually pretty close to a parallel, to the stroke, to the layer, to the paint surface, so that I'm just pulling it, and the tooth of the wet layer of paint that's underneath it is actually pulling that paint off the brush. I'm not pushing as much the paint off the brush as I am letting the other paint pull the new paint off. And that's how it lays down on there without intermingling the two or blending them together. If I go back and I start playing with that brush stroke and I try to fix it in any way, then I'm going to start pulling the paint from underneath up into it. So I have to put the brush stroke down in one stroke and then leave it. So when I say leave it, like right now, I'm obviously grabbing the end of that and I'm pulling it down so that it blends in with the other stroke. But that's exactly what it's doing. I'm pulling it, and then it's going to start blending it with the paint underneath it. And I'm doing that purposefully, knowing that that's what's going to happen, so that the two feel as if they go together, like a wave that goes from more opaque up into the more frothy water, and more air, more lights going through it. So it's getting brighter and brighter as it gets to the top. And it gets darker as it gets towards the body of water. So by dragging that, I start to blend it a little bit, and then the two integrate. So the first stroke, though, has to be done all at once in one stroke. If I mess that one up, then I go back in and I do it again. Any color that you place your stroke of paint on top of, you're going to pick up on the back side, on that side of the brush. It's going to start to develop up and adhere to your brush. That's why you have to do each stroke in one motion, because if you do it in two or three, then all you're going to start doing is applying the paint that was underneath on top of whatever you work on at that point. Does that make sense? So that's the reason why when you're working with thick paint, each stroke that you do, if you want it to look exactly the way that the paint that you've mixed and picked up, if you want it to look like the paint that you've just applied to your brush, then you have to apply that stroke in one stroke. Once you start to go back and play with it, you're using the paint that was underneath it, and you're starting to blend the two layers together.